Trevs Show. I'm the Trev. It's too sweet. Anyway, continuing on with your outdoor games. And we're on our fourth outdoor game, or your third winter classic, depending on your perception of things, how you want to look at it. Either way, we're sticking with the ball theme. So that's never a bad thing either, but this one isn't all that bad a game, despite what the score on the outcome might reflect, but it was still a pretty good game. We're going to talk about the Boston Bruins and the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's do it up. So our now annual event has taken place again on January 1st, 2010 at Fenway Park, the home of Major League Baseball's Boston Red Sox. But much like last year's game, there were other options being explored, which were considered but not limited to new Yankee Stadium, the Las Vegas Strip. I personally would have loved to have seen how they would have made that one work. Nationals Park or RFK Stadium in Washington, Commercia Park in Detroit, and the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena. Now, the Rose Bowl was quickly ruled out, not only because they were hosting the actual Rose Bowl game, but because they were also hosting the 2010 BCS National Championships. So there's that. Commercia Park was ruled out, as Detroit had just played in the 2009 Winter Classic. So there's that. And new Yankee Stadium was in strong consideration because the Rangers were supposed to be the Bruins' opponent for this year, or at least that's what the strong push was meant toward. But that didn't materialize. So instead of going through all the motions, they decided to go with Fenway, which was not a bad choice by any stretch of the imagination. And since the NHL was not hosting an All-Star game this year, as they had this belief of not sending players to the Olympics just after an All-Star game, as they had signed players up to go to the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, this was the premier event on the NHL's calendar year for 2010. Now, Fenway Park comes with a nice history of its own, being one of the oldest Major League Baseball arenas, being opened in 1912, and seeing the Boston Red Sox raise 8 of their 9 World Series banners here. But the biggest selling point is, and always should be, the Big Green Monster. I mean, if you're not a fan of that, I don't know what to tell you. Quick to point out as well, the artistic flair is still kind of slowly creeping itself in, even if it is only minuscule still to this point. Don't worry, we'll get to the flash and pizzazz of decorating the stadium up in future games. It's just starting to poke its head out now. But now that we're diving into this, let's get into the jerseys and the rosters. Start with the Bruins. So the Bruins came in with a design from then team vice president Cam Neely, who we will talk about at some point. Now the logo is inspired from the 48-49 season logo, that one right there, with the jersey being inspired from the jerseys the team wore from 1955 to 1957. Here's their set. Right there. And the biggest takeaway, obviously, is the fact that there's more brown than black. But keep in mind, this is the first time the Bruins have worn any kind of brown since 1935. So it's not a terribly foreign concept at all. I don't remember where I put this on my rank of Winter Classic jerseys, but if you want to check that video out, follow that link up above you. So now to go over the Bruins lineup. I mean, you see some names now in this game, like Blake Wheeler. You see some classic guys like Recchi, Chara, Bergeron, Rask. It's important to note that Rask was the backup in this game, but in retrospect, he should have been the starter. Just saying. Michael Ryder, playing in his first outdoor game since the inaugural outdoor game, the 2003 Heritage Classic. Head coach is called Julian, who is coaching in his second outdoor game, again, coach of the 2003 Montreal Canadiens in the National Heritage Classic. The only scratch by the Bruins was Adam McQuaid. So we've talked about the yin, let's talk about the yang. Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers didn't think terribly hard outside the box on this one, essentially just giving us an updated retro of the jersey they wore in 73-74. A little bit like that. The biggest difference, obviously, other than the fact that it's made by Reebok, is the nameplate is in black with white lettering. And this was apparently such a hit amongst Flyers fans that it became their full-time road jersey the next season. But yeah, not a lot as far as like thinking differently as far as, an appeal kind of game goes. But let's talk about the roster. Flyers. When you get down to a Gagne, veteran like him playing in a game like this, Carcillo, we'll hear about him. Carter, Richards, Hartnell, and Pronger. A scary four-headed monster at the time. And then you got your younger guys in here, your JVRs, your Claude Giroux. Boucher was your backup. Kimmo Timonen and Daniel Briere. Michael Layton was your starter. Peter Laviolette is your head coach. Nobody on the Flyers is playing in their multiple outdoor game. They're all playing in their first. Riley Cote, Ryan Perrant, and Mika Piorla were your scratches for the Flyers. Temperature of puck drop was 39.1 degrees Fahrenheit, which translates to Canadian to about 4 degrees Celsius, which isn't overly cold, but you might want to bring stuff along just in case. You never know. Attendance was 38,112, which by this point makes it the lowest attended outdoor game. But that won't last long. So having said all that, let's review this game. Now, believe it or not, there was no scoring in the first period. And that's not to say that the first period wasn't exciting or dull, because it wasn't. There was a lot of puck movement. There was a lot of activity to the puck. So there was just a lot of things going on, just no offense. But that's not to exclude our firsts in this one. We had our first fight in an NHL outdoor game between Sean Thornton and Daniel Carcillo. Now, Carcillo did get the takedown. This was at the 12:01 mark of the first period. And ironically enough, and probably a lot by design, Carcillo called his shot. Essentially, he gave an interview a couple days before the game saying, yeah, he would get in the first outdoor game fight, and he did. So he wasn't lying. Then after matching cross-checking penalties between Oscar Bartulis and David Krejci at the 15:22 mark, that would essentially close it on the first period. So despite a 0-0 score, Boston did manage to outshoot the Flyers 9-6. So again, not a boring period, not by any stretch of the imagination, just no offense. So a testament to how both teams are playing really good defense by this point. Let's go to the second. So we didn't have to wait overly long for this game to finally start getting some goals in it. It was at the 4:42 mark. Danny Sivert would score not just his first goal of the season, but the first goal of his NHL career. Now, he wasn't a rookie at this standard. He'd already played 5 or 6 seasons. He has just never scored up until this point. And this goal definitely needs some explaining. But I will say, before I explain anything, that it was from Jeff Carter and Scott Hartnell. Now I'll explain it. So while all this was going on, before Sivert even scored, Hartnell had passed the puck to Carter and set himself up in position in front of Tim Thomas. Not that it's a non-random play or anything like that. It happens all the time. The only thing is, the way Hartnell stopped, he kind of gave Thomas a slight little bump. Nothing that would, dictate a penalty. There was no goaltender interference. He just gave him a little bump. Now, Tim Thomas, being Tim Thomas, in his infinite wisdom, because nobody ever said Tim Thomas was a smart man, just a really good goalie. But in his infinite wisdom, in his infinite wisdom, he decides he's going to give Scott Hartnell a piece of his mind, or at least the back of Scott Hartnell, a piece of his goalie stick. And as he's doing that, Danny Syvert is shooting it in from the blue line to score his first NHL career goal to give the Flyers the 1-0 lead and the first goal of the 2010 Winter Classic. So again, in retrospect, maybe Rask would have been a better starter. The only penalties speak of in this period came at 10:16 when Zdeno Chara would get called for tripping. But with that, Philly exits the second period with a 1-0 lead, while also outshooting the Bruins 12-6. So Philly is finally playing smart hockey in this game. I mean, it's not to say that they weren't, but they were making things connect. They were making the plays. They were making Boston scramble. I mean, to hold the Bruins to 6 shots in the second period, that in itself is usually the hardest of things to do, especially in 2010 when Boston was Boston. But they did a wonderful job of getting in Tim Thomas's mind rent-free. I mean, I don't want to steal a catchphrase, but if you're going to tend the goal, tend the goal. Don't be doing stupid stuff like that. Philly was playing smart hockey. So now we're going to the third. So the third period would start off with a hooking penalty from Johnny Boychuk at the 1:30 mark, followed by a hooking penalty from Daniel Carcillo at 4:45. And by the halfway point of the period, Boston is playing time to tie the game hockey, and Philly is playing shut the door hockey. But thanks to a Kimmo Timonen tripping penalty at 16:08, the Bruins would take full advantage of this, as Mark Recchi, the ageless wonder himself, would score his 8th on the season on the power play, with the assist going to Derek Morris and David Krejci to tie the game at 1. So that this was late in the third. But the lesson in all this is good things happen when you chase the rebounds. So now it's a case of next goal wins. Philly's trying to take the game back. Boston's at least trying to win it. Maybe even take it to overtime. So at 19:14, Daniel Briere would take a tripping call, which essentially gave Boston a power play for the rest of the period. And despite both teams playing hard to get that last goal, we were destined to go to overtime. Now Boston led the third period in shots 9-5. That last minute, oh my goodness, a huge flurry of activities in that last minute. It could have been a 2-1 win for either team either way. But hey, ain't nothing wrong with overtime. Let's talk about that. So for the first time since the 2008 Winter Classic, we have an outdoor game in overtime, with the Bruins starting overtime on the power play. But they couldn't capitalize on the opportunities given. And if it weren't for Thomas, probably, making up for past transgressions, they could have let that 2-on-1 in pretty easily, between Briere and Richards. But thanks to coming up ice, Marco Sturm would score a tip-in on a shot by Patrice Bergeron, passed up from Zdeno Chara at the 1:57 mark to give the Bruins the 2-1 win. So not a bad game if it goes to overtime and the home team wins for a change. Now Boston and Philly both had 2 shots in overtime, with Boston outshooting Philly 26-25 overall in this game. No penalties in overtime, but combined 24 penalty minutes called in this game as well. So again, not a bad game. Just typical Philly, typical Boston hockey at the time. Someone had to be the best defensive team, someone had to be an offensive team. Both teams could be either one on a flip of a switch, but the score is only 2-1. Still a good game, though. Talk about some of the firsts. So as mentioned, this game gave you our first fight in an NHL outdoor game. The first time a player scored their first career goal in an NHL outdoor game. Our first overtime winner, thanks to Marco Sturm. Good old German efficiency. And the first hometown team to win an outdoor game. So you gotta remember 3 previous before this: Edmonton, Buffalo, Chicago, all lost. Boston was the first to win on home ice. Great game for what it was worth. Great game. I mean, it didn't live up to the 2009. I would definitely put it above 2008. Definitely. But all in all, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Let me know what you thought of the 2010 NHL Winter Classic. It's another one of Trev's Hockey Shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you're right here. That's great for both of us. That's giving me the watch time. So if you're helping me with the watch time, you're awesome. But if you like what you watched, if you dig what I'm doing, if you just want to say hi, or if you genuinely do like it, give it a thumbs up. I think I've earned it. The red button that wants to subscribe all over it, you know you want to. We're almost at 200. The goal is 250. We're almost at 200. So let's make that happen. Social, that I barely use, is in the description down below. Let's move forward as far as the outdoor games is concerned. 2011 is another year of firsts. This is the first one with 2 outdoor games on the calendar, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Either way, in the meantime, in between time, you look for more videos from Trev. Later.